So my name is Dr. Julia Pullin and I'm the founder of the Chiro Health Clinic. Now, I heard that you'd missed the workshop this week, but that's not a problem. So what we decided to do was actually send you a little video which summarised what we covered, what we learned, so basically you didn't feel like you'd missed out. There are in fact over 100 different types of arthritis, and if we had to group them very broadly to start off, there are the inflammatory types of arthritis and the non-inflammatory types. So the inflammatory types of arthritis would be things like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, gout. So they're the really sort of nasty ones that the body actually starts to attack itself in essence due to the level of inflammation that's there. However, the non-inflammatory types of arthritis, or the most common one, is osteoarthritis. Okay, but osteoarthritis has a number of names depending on what part of the body is involved. So some people may talk about osteoarthritis could be shortened to OA. It can also be called DJD, which is degenerative joint disease. It can also be called, you can have DDD, which is degenerative disc disease, which often goes in association with the DDD. Then you can also call it spondylosis as well. And spondylosis actually it just means osteoarthritis, but it's in the neck. Typically, that's when people use that term. But in essence, it is the same thing. So when we're talking about osteoarthritis, then what we're dealing with then is more of a degenerative condition rather than being an inflammatory condition. Now that doesn't mean that there's no inflammation in the region, but the inflammation is very different in these sort of circumstances. So what we're going to be covering in more detail is the type of inflammation and how it affects the joint. So the first thing you need to know is a little bit of anatomy of the joint. So I'm going to quickly draw you a joint. So here we go. So imagine there the bones to start off, and then what you've got is a cartilage layer that's just here and here. Okay. Then what you have is across to here. That would be your joint capsule, okay? I'll just do, there's your cartilage. All right then, so then within the joint capsule, what you have is some fluid in here, okay? All that in there. So this fluid is called synovial fluid. Now, synovial fluid is wonderful stuff. So synovial fluid, the best I can describe, it's like this beautiful, silky, greasy type of consistency, and it's what allows for the glide of the joints the joint surfaces, okay? So synovial fluid obviously is really, really important for the lubrication of the joint. But then what also synovial fluid does, synovial fluid provides the joint with the nutrition it needs to keep it healthy at the same time. So what's really important in this situation is the synovial fluid is actually produced by the joint capsule. But that can only occur if the joint capsule gets stretched. It has to be stressed in some way and stretched in order for it to produce the synovial fluid. So, you know, if you have somebody who's got arthritis, then the first thing that we often know is that their activity levels have been reduced for a significant period of time. So it means that they haven't been stressing that joint, or they have done excessive amount of work through those joints in order to overstress them and you've had excessive wear. It's got to be one of those two situations. So excessive wear most people can understand, but the lack of movement leading to arthritis, people will go a little bit, I don't really get it. Well, the reason is, if you are not moving your joints enough, then what happens is the joint capsule is not getting stretched, which means that it doesn't produce synovial fluid, and so you're not putting good nutrition into the joint in order to keep the joint healthy. So essentially, the best I can describe it is it's a little bit like the joint drying up. So if the joint dries up, then that means that it's not getting the nutrition that it needs, so it's going to break down sooner, it's going to break down much easier and much faster, which means you get arthritis sooner and much earlier. So when people have arthritis, the last thing they should do is actually decrease their activity levels too much. I know that when people have arthritis, they go, oh, I can't do that because of my joints and I can't, but actually no. That is the time when you should be stretching your joints and stressing them so that you start the production of the synovial fluid again. And that doesn't mean going to the gym and doing an excessive amount of movement. What that actually means is the movements can be slow, but they have to be enough to stretch the joint in order to activate that mechanism. So let's imagine now that we're talking about inflammatory types of arthritis, because they behave in a different way. So typically what happens is the synovial fluid gets turned into a thing called pannus, and pannus attacks the joint. So it actually attacks the, in particular, it attacks through here, it can attack the cartilage, and so then you end up with joints that are breaking down but for a different reason, and it actually gets into the bones and into the cartilage itself. So the body is attacking itself, which is very, very different to what's happened in osteoarthritis. So because movement is so important to keep the joints healthy, that's where chiropractic and osteopathy comes in. Because our job is to make sure that these joints move and that we stretch the joint in order to make sure that it can produce the synovial fluid that it needs in order to keep that joint healthy and well lubricated, so it gets the nutrition that it needs, but it also has enough synovial fluid in there to allow for the glide of the joints, and obviously that means that they're less painful. The other thing that happens is, as you stretch the joint, which is what happens when we do an adjustment, so a chiropractic or an osteopathic treatment, then what actually happens, that stimulates the production of the synovial fluid. Now the synovial fluid actually allows, it kind of like plumps up the joint as well. So again, that increases the space between the joints. So you know when people talk about the joint, the bones are rubbing together, by making sure that the joints are functioning, moving, and that they're stretched regularly, means that the synovial fluid gets flooded into that area, plumping it up, and so that reduces the risk of that as well. So it's like a win-win-win situation. So movement of the joints is absolutely essential when you're talking about people with arthritis. And so that's where our role comes in as chiropractors and osteopaths. We make sure that the joints are moving, that they're functioning to the best of their ability. So for a lot of the workshops that we cover, we normally talk about the big mistake that people make when they have a certain problem, whether it be a low back problem, neck pain and headaches. But obviously when we're talking about arthritis, we're dealing with a slightly different animal, is what I would say. So normally what we say is the big mistake that people make is to put heat on the area, okay? But arthritis can be very different, and it depends on where the arthritis is in its stages and what type of arthritis you're actually dealing with. And this is where going to see a professional makes all the difference in the world, because they'll tell you when it's most appropriate to use heat and when it's most appropriate to use the ice pack instead. So if we're dealing, I'm going to give you a bit of a general idea. So if we're dealing with one of the inflammatory arthritis, so something like rheumatoid arthritis, gout, psoriatic arthritis, the really angry types of arthritis, There is no way that you want to put heat on these types of arthritis. It will aggravate the condition. They are already very angry, they are already very inflamed. So it's a bit like shoving a burnt thumb under the hot tap. It's the last thing that you're going to do. It's just, you want to calm the area down, you want to cool and soothe the area, okay? When you're dealing with osteoarthritis, well, like I say, this one is where it's a little bit more fluid because it depends on the situation. So if you're dealing with, say, muscle tension and muscle tightness that's protecting the area, yes, some heat can actually relieve that. But I'd say that you don't necessarily want the heat over the joint. You want the heat on the muscles that are close to the joint, but not on the joint itself. On the joint itself, the joint can still be inflamed, it can still be angry, and the structures very close to the joint can be. So that's where you would still use the ice pack. So in my personal opinion, I would always say err on the side of caution and go for the ice pack first. But there are occasional times when heat can be useful, but I'd say you need to keep a little bit of distance between the joint and what you're going to heat. So it's mainly the muscles that are around the area rather than over the joints themselves. Okay, so I hope you found that useful when we talk about when it's appropriate to use either heat or ice. So during the workshop, we ran through a few things that you can do at home in order to help yourself. So the first thing is to make sure that you keep you healthy. So in order for your joints to be healthy, you need to be healthy. So the first thing you need to do is look after yourself from a nutritional perspective. So eating good foods, eating clean foods, keeping away from grains can also be very beneficial, because what we want to do is make sure that your body is less angry and less inflamed. So what we want to do is calm your body down. Now that can actually be done in another way by supplementing your diet with omega-3 fatty acids, so fish oil. So what we now know is that in 90% of people that take fish oil for 3 months, their inflammatory markers are actually normalised. So this can have a massive impact on you if you are suffering from arthritis. And what we recommend is that you take a teaspoon a day. So it's quite a lot of fish oil that you need. But what the current thinking is that people that have inflammatory conditions, they suspect are, especially if they feel that they need to take sort of anti-inflammatory medications as well, they suspect that actually they are just deficient in many, many cases. So what we strongly recommend is that people actually take a really good quality fish oil supplement, and that can often help massively. And we've done a lot of research to get really good ones in the clinic. Okay. We found that things like, say, glucosamine obviously had a lot of press, let's say about 5 years ago. And that's because glucosamine is one of the building blocks of cartilage. The current research shows that the glucosamine can be useful, but only up until 12 months in. Once you've taken it for 12 months, you don't get any extra benefits from taking it. So that's just something for you to be aware of. And then obviously more recently, turmeric has been used, and people have found that that has been particularly useful in helping to reduce inflammation as well. So those are, from a nutritional perspective, are what we would recommend at this moment in time. If you're talking about arthritis in particular of the knees, then what we recommend is also making sure that you stay very, very well hydrated. Now, it's across the board really, not just of arthritis of the knees. But with arthritis in the knees, they have found that 90% of conditions improve just by making sure that people drink more water. Okay, so something so simple can make all the difference in the world. So it's just something to be aware of that could make quite a difference to you. Okay, so that's the nutritional side of things, and I hope that's helpful. So would you agree with me that everybody should get their spine, their nervous system, their joints checked in order to make sure that they're moving to the best of their ability? I know I'm biased. I mean, you know, I've been doing this job for almost 25 years. I get to see the results day in, day out. I get to see the changes that people go through and the transformations every single day. But the reality of it is, if your joints are moving better, you will experience less pain from your arthritis and you will generally be more happier. And in my words, you will have more mojo. If you'd like to come into the clinic in order to get your joints checked for any type of arthritis, basically, and we will let you know whether we can help you or not, then all you've got to do, click on the button below and a member of the team will get in touch with you as quick as possible.